Safety Guard Training Course, Section 2, the Private Security Investigative Services Act and Ministry Code of Conduct. Table of Contents. 1. Private Security and Investigative Services Act. 2. Who needs a license? 3. Licensing requirements. 4. How to obtain a security license. 5. Cost of security license. 6. Producing your license. 7. Ministry Code of Conduct. 8. Complaint procedure. 9. Failure to comply. 10. Regulated equipment. 11. Uniform regulations. 12. Other regulations, including animals. 13. Ministry contact information. Why create CISA? The private security industry has grown dramatically over the past 40 years, from 4,000 licensed private investigators and security guards in 1966 to over 64,000 today. There are about 520 licensed agencies in the province providing private investigation and security guard services. The new legislation and regulations will ensure that practitioners are qualified to provide protective services. By regulating things like uniforms and equipment use, we will ensure that the private security industry serves us all well. Who needs a license? You may need a license if you are paid to do work that consists mainly of protecting persons or property. This includes bodyguards, bouncers, and loss prevention personnel. For example, you will need a license if your main responsibility in a bar or restaurant, for instance, is controlling entrances and patrolling the property to ensure the safety and security of the establishment and its occupants. You will need a license if you are working in a residential building and your primary responsibility is to patrol the interior hallways and stairwells, to enforce property rules, and detect criminal activity. Licensing. To be eligible for a license, you must be 18 years of age or older, be eligible to work in Canada, and have no convictions for a prescribed offense for which you have not been granted a pardon. Who is responsible for obtaining my license? Me or my employer? You are. Every security license that is issued is valid for a period of 12 months. It is also your responsibility to renew your license each year. You are free to change employers or obtain additional employment with another security firm without having to be relicensed. How to get a security license. Step 1. Ministry-approved training. You must complete a 40-hour training program provided by a company or institution that is registered with the Ministry of Community Safety and Correctional Services. Step 2. Ministry test. Once training is completed, you must write a 60-question multiple-choice test with the ministry. This test can be written at any drive test center in Ontario, the same place you would go to get your driver's license. Step 3. License application. Once you have passed the test, you may apply for a license with the ministry. Applications must be sent in with all required documentation, including a passport photograph. License applications may take up to 2 weeks to process. Once issued, the license is valid for 1 year. Cost of security license. Step 1. 40-hour training course. The cost, open market. Cost varies between companies and colleges. Step 2. Ministry test. The cost, $60. If you fail the test, each additional attempt will cost $60. Step 3. Licensing. Cost, $80. License is valid for 1 year. You only have to complete the training and pass the test once. However, you must renew your license and pay the $80 fee every subsequent year you work as a security guard. Producing a license. Am I obligated to show my license to a member of the public upon request? Yes. As per the CISA, you are required to produce your license, which means showing the front of your license to the individual, displaying your license number, name, and photo. Why am I required to produce my license to members of the public? In the interest of public safety, members of the public have the right to know that they are dealing with a licensed security guard and/or private investigator. You are not required to hand over your license to a member of the public or show the back of your license. Code of Conduct. Why is there a code of conduct? The Code of Conduct outlines standards for the industry so that businesses and individuals know how to perform their duties in a professional, honest, and respectful way. Discrimination and racism will not be tolerated, nor will negligence or unlawful conduct under the Code. Code of Conduct continued. Every individual licensee, while working as a security guard, shall A. Act with honesty and integrity, B. Respect and use all property and equipment in accordance with the conditions of his or her license, C. Comply with all federal, provincial, and municipal laws, D. Treat all persons equally without discrimination based on a person's race, ancestry, place of origin, color, ethnic origin, citizenship, creed, sex, sexual orientation, age, marital status, family status, or disability. E. Refrain from using profane, abusive, or insulting language or actions that are otherwise uncivil to any member of the public. F. Refrain from exercising unnecessary force. G. Refrain from behavior that is either prohibited or not authorized by law. H. Respect the privacy of others by treating all information received while working as a private investigator or security guard as confidential, except where disclosure is required as part of such work or by law. And I. Cooperate with police where it is required by law. Code of Conduct continued. No individual licensee shall A. Be unfit for duty while working through consumption of alcohol or drugs, B. Conspire with another person or aid or abet another licensee in a breach of this code of conduct, C. Willfully or negligently make a false statement or complaint against another licensee, or a D. Misrepresent to any person the type, class, or conditions of his or her license. Complaint procedure. Definition of a complaint. In accordance with Section 19(1) of the Private Security and Investigative Services Act, the registrar may receive a complaint from any person alleging that a licensee has breached the code of conduct established under the regulations, or failed to comply with the Act or the regulations, or breached a licensed condition. Lodging a complaint. A complaint may be filed with the registrar within 90 days after the subject matter that gives rise to the complaint or at a later date with the registrar's consent. A member of the public who makes a complaint must complete, sign, date, and submit a complaint form. This form is easily accessible on the Private Security and Investigative Services branch website. Failure to comply. Individual. Every individual convicted of an offense under this Act is liable to a fine of not more than $25,000, imprisonment for a term of not more than 1 year, or both. Company. Every business entity convicted of an offense under this Act is liable to a fine of not more than $250,000. Regulated equipment. Firearms. An individual licensee may use a firearm in the provision of private investigator or security guard services only if he or she is authorized to carry the firearm under Section 20 of the Firearms Act. Batons. An individual licensee may use a baton in the provision of private investigator or security guard services only if the following conditions are met. 1. The baton is issued to the individual licensee by the licensed or registered business entity that employs the individual licensee. And 2. The individual licensee may use the baton for a defensive purposes only. Handcuffs. An individual licensee may use handcuffs in the provision of private investigator or security guard services only if the handcuffs are issued to the individual licensee by the licensed or registered business entity that employs the individual licensee. Uniform regulations. Identification. An identification tag with the security guard's name or license number must be affixed to the chest of the outermost piece of the uniform. Shirt color. If the uniform includes a shirt with a collar, the shirt must not be black or navy blue. Rank chevron. The uniform must not have rank chevrons. Hat. The uniform must not include a police-style forage cap. Other regulations. Restraints. An individual licensee may not use cable ties or strip ties as restraints in the provision of private investigator or security guard services. Insurance. Every licensed business entity shall carry general liability insurance in the amount of at least $2 million. License review. Your license application could be under review if you have outstanding fines, have been convicted and found guilty of an offense, or have a conflict of interest. Animals. The Act has a regulation on the use of dogs. What can dogs be used for? The Ministry recognizes the growing usefulness of and demand for dogs in the security industry. As a result, we developed a regulation that takes both the industry's needs and the care and control requirements of the animals into account. The regulation does permit the use of dogs for patrolling purposes, but only under certain conditions. For example, must be under the care and control of a handler. Dogs can also be used for tracking, for example, missing persons, and detection purposes, for example, drugs and explosives. Animals continued. Will special training be required to use a dog? Yes, dog handlers will need special training. The Ministry is developing the training and testing materials. Will licensed businesses be able to provide drop and guard services, dogs being left alone to protect and patrol property? No. Does the regulation ban breeds of dogs? No. The regulation does not go beyond any current provincial legislation that addresses banned breeds. Dog handlers must keep their dogs on a leash at all times. Security guards cannot use dogs for crowd control. End of Section 2, the Private Security Investigative Services Act and Ministry Code of Conduct.